Well, good morning, you scallywags and scoundrels. Welcome to the Sunday sermon, which again is 2 days late and $2 short. But you know what? We're getting there eventually, all right? Now, today's Sunday sermon is part 2 of Ralph Waldo Emerson's self-reliance essay. Because it is just so fabulous and, you know, I didn't print double-sided, which I should have, but it's quite fantastic. And so we're going to be dissecting part 2 today in our Sunday sermon. And again, this essay can be found online. I'll put the link in the description below again, because I highly recommend taking it, printing it out, and reading it yourself. It's fantastic, and the best way to do reading of this kind of thing, in my opinion, is annotations, which check that out, right? Also, writing things by hand is just a really great way to reinforce whatever ideas and concepts that you are trying to learn and, you know, get better at. So anyways, before we get started, we're going to have a little moment for our remembrance of Scott Adams and all of the great men who have been taken before their time and have left an indelible mark upon the trajectory of humankind and human history. Now, a simultaneous sip in 3, 2, 1. Oh, I'm telling you, coffee. Coffee, you can absolutely see how people ended up conquering the world in service of fulfilling such a addiction as coffee. Now, before we get started, let's go through some community notes. All right. So, first things first, the books of the week are, we're still reading through quite a bit of Lewis L'Amour. I'm going to be starting on some Zane Grey next, continuing in our American Western little path that we're on here. I also read Silk Road by Colin Falconer, as well as Lord of the Atlas by Colin Falconer. Those were both really good. I don't know if I'm going to be reading any more of Colin Falconer because he definitely has a particular flavor, but both of those I thought were very good, very well written, little kind of short adventure novels. So recommend those. For film and TV. Also, I have to admit, before I get to film and TV, I have been rereading some of the, scandalous romance novels that I already own. I keep most of them on my books, an e-reader, just so that I don't, pollute the shelves with all of it here. And I showcased some of these last time, but these, however, I have started a small collection of for a couple of reasons. So first off, I do really love Joanna Lindsay. I think I talked about A Gentle Feuding last time. So can you see that? Do you see that? Look at the artwork on that. Okay, so a couple of things. Let's look at the whole thing. And they sadly cut off my man's nude derriere here, which is a tragedy, truly. But that's A Gentle Feuding by Joanna Lindsay, an original book club hardcover version. And then this is Tender is the Storm. Okay, look at that. Look at that. I mean, like, art, darlings, art. And it is in fact art, because the artist who did both of these covers for Joanna Lindsay was Robert McGinnis, which, if you don't know who Robert McGinnis is, I highly recommend that you go and you look into some of Robert McGinnis's art. And you know what? Maybe that's what we're going to add that live action right here, people. We're going to do plus, we need art/artist of the week. And we're going to put Robert McGinnis. As our artist of the week this week. So Robert McGinnis was a fantastic illustrator who is really well known, not just for his bodice ripper romance covers, but he most famously is known as the illustrator who did an enormous amount of work for the film and TV industry, and not the least of which were some of James Bond 007, Robert, what's his name, Broccoli? You know, the OG versions of the James Bond posters, which we are also a proud owner of a few. Okay, you have to come with me. You have to be in secret. Look at our ceiling. Yeah. Okay. So first off, I don't know if he did that one, but I do know that one right there. Look at that. Look at it. Isn't he fabulous? So, we have Christmas lights up in the hallway. But here we go. Let me unplug these so we get a really good non-glare version of... There he is. There he is. Can you see that? Look at it. Look at that. Oh, spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. Okay, so that was one of Robert McGinnis's posters for James Bond's Thunderball with the late great and ever estimable Sean Connery. Okay, and that was a Christmas present from a few years ago that I got. I didn't get it, but I gifted it. And it is the an Italian version of the film poster it's an original for Thunderball. And that artwork was by Robert McGinnis. And also he did the artwork for Breakfast at Tiffany's. There are a lot of, films from that era that have Robert McGinnis's hand in the artwork. There's also a lot beyond just bodice rippers. He did an enormous amount of work in the kind of not film noir, but like the thriller noir pulp detective fiction as well. And I'm hopefully going to start a little collection of that as well, because I'm a huge fan of Robert McGinnis's work. So, and it's so beneficial to one that your favorite artist also happens to be a artist that has worked on, films, being a film buff and or a film aficionado. I wouldn't say I'm a buff. I'm just an aficionado. And, for him to also be someone who's done the covers of so many different novels, I'm a huge fan of, because it gives me an excuse to collect books. But anyways, that's our artist of the week is Robert McGinnis. And our books of the week, again, are Silk Road and Lord of the Atlas, both by Colin Falconer. Our film and TV for the week is Green Acres, which, if you have not seen the fabulous Eva Gabor in Green Acres, I highly recommend it. It's fabulous. It is everything that you need inspirationally from a, light, comedic, short bite. They're like 22 to 25 minute episodes with Eva Gabor and an outstanding cast from that era, and just the costuming, everything. It's just chef's kiss. Love Eva Gabor and Green Acres. And I wish I could remember the guy, the leading man that was in it, but they're fabulous. They're absolutely fabulous. And so Green Acres, check that out. 10 out of 10 recommend. And so many episodes. All right, like this was back when they did like 35 to 40 episodes a season. So it'll last you a while. It's fantastic. And then the other TV show is Primal, in honor of the third season being released recently. phenomenal show by Gennady Tarakovsky, and I hope I'm saying that right. Fantastic season. We've absolutely enjoyed both the first and second season. We rewatched the first season in the lead up to season 3. Fantastic. So Primal and Green Acres, those are our 2 shows for the week, and the movies for the week are Dinner at 8 with oh God, there's Dinner at 8 and Uber Blonde, Platinum Blonde, not Marilyn Monroe. Oh God, it'll come back to me. So it's Dinner at 8 and then Love Before Breakfast. And Love Before Breakfast is with Carol Lombard and Jean Harlow. I knew it would come to me. So Dinner at 8 is with Jean Harlow and Love Before Breakfast is with Carol Lombard. And both of these movies, they are constant return tos for me. Love them both. So definitely highly recommend checking those out. Oh, our recognition for the week is for Kai Cenat. Shout out to Kai Cenat for deciding to make a change with his life and learning and deciding to learn and improve himself. I think this is one of the highest, most estimable things that you can do with yourself is to redirect your life and decide to make a change in a positive direction. And I firmly believe that one of the single greatest things that you can do to try and improve yourself is to read and to, try and learn language and expand your vocabulary and I'll do a whole video about this too, but I truly think that language and our ability to precisely and poignantly express ourselves to each other is one of the single greatest demarcators of what makes the human species so prolifically great. And in that same line, there is Chris kind of reads. So huge fan of Chris kind of reads. I think Kai Cenat, maybe the weird internet universe is so, the algorithm is just so on point right now that maybe Kai Cenat saw Chris kind of reads and based off of other experiences in his life right now decided that this was something that he wanted to do, which I fully support. I'm on board with it, Kai Cenat. I'm gonna follow the secret YouTube just for the support. But go out and read, you guys. Expand your horizons, expand your vocabulary, and it's 10 out of 10. Okay, so Kai Cenat. Also, shout out to Asmongold. Huge fan of Asmongold. I really enjoy his reviews of socio-political issues and his reasonableness. And he was just recognized by some leading political figures. So I think shout out to Asmongold for keeping me abreast of current knowledge alongside all of the research that I do myself, but for also reminding me that there are just as many regular, degular, average Joe, basic bitches as me in the world, and that is incredibly reassuring. Also, Miranda Goes Outside. So Miranda Goes Outside is a former REI employee who has a YouTube channel all about going and backpacking and doing things outside. She is just a wholesome little breath of fresh air and a lady who is doing everything that she can to create a little bubble of the universe that encourages people to go outdoors and appreciate being in nature and to just be thankful for what you have. I don't know if that's her direct intention, but it's what I get from it. And we watched her most recent video the other day, and yeah, so shout out to Miranda Goes Outside. I'll link videos to all of these people, to their channels below. But yeah, that's our recognition for the week. They're all, quote unquote influencers right now. But yeah, don't think that I don't know about all of you that exist in my life that I have been privileged enough to encounter, that I don't recognize that you are also doing remarkable things in your own life, okay? We see you and we applaud you, we weep with you, and we celebrate with you. So continue down this path. If it isn't good yet, it's because it's not over. That's the misquote of a terrible misquote, but it all. I think it's something like it all comes out right in the end, and if it's not right, then it is not yet the end, and you got it. Okay, you have got it within you to be and do everything that you set out for yourself. All you have to do is wake up every morning and make the choice that you are going to continue down that path. All right? So, in that vein, and one more little shout out. So, a shout out to Did I do that last week? I may have shouted them out last week. I have a new planner, so I don't have those notes, but I think we did shout them out last week. But anyways, this, in an extremely tangential way, leads us beautifully into... Oh, wait, we're not done yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. For our quantum ripples, please continue to send as much positive encouragement and support through the quantum ether as you can for the people in Iran/Persia. And, just think about that. And I constantly think about the phenomenal people that I know in my life who are facing enormous tragedy and personal loss and personal difficulties. So I'm thinking about all of you as well. But I also want to encourage everybody to work on thankfulness and being present, and that everyone is going through an epoch in their life right now, whether it's a new birth, which shout out to my new moms. I cannot tell you how thrilled and happy it makes me to see how much love and beauty and purpose it gives these women that I'm so fortunate to know, and to see how they just seem to blossom and settle into themselves with, these new lives that they're able to bring into the world. So shout out to my new moms. And, there's also people that deal with death and tragedy and, people just having a graduation, right? Like just graduating from school, whatever level that's at. It's an enormous new step to be taking. And, beyond that, if you're a college graduate, now you're moving into the workaday epoch. And I know how stressful and anxiety-inducing it was for me when I first got into the workplace, or was trying to get into the workplace. So thinking about all of you at that particular epoch of your life. And then there are people who are retiring and who are having to kind of unplug from that work mode that we all live in for an inordinate amount of our lives, right? I think all of these major changes, everyone that you know is going through one, and just be thankful and be present and enjoy where you're at. And I think that everyone who decided to be here in the best way possible, thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's an underrated thing to make a choice to be the best possible version of yourself that you can be, which was what last week's sermon was all about, right? Like, it was all about self-reliance and needing to make the choice that you are going to be the best version of yourself that you can be, and a full and complete acceptance of the skill points and traits that you've been blessed with and how to maximize them to their fullest. So shout out to all of those. All right. And enjoy what you have because you have it, and you may not tomorrow. Now, that was plenty of rambling to get going, and this is going to be a long video. So here we go. This is for our second portion of the, I don't think I have the title on here, Self-Reliance Essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is entitled, Suppose No Man Can Violate His Nature. Now, at the beginning, it says, all the sallies of his will are rounded in by the law of his being, as the inequalities of the Andes and the Himalayas are insignificant in the curve of the sphere. All right, now, personal admittance moment here. I had to double check sallies. So I kind of knew what it meant, but I wanted to double check. And it is a sudden charge of a besieged place. Or a sortie is a synonym to sally, S-O-R-T-I-E, sortie, which is to attack from a place, from a position of defense. So basically it's like if you're in the castle, a sortie or a sally is where you are defending a place of, you are fighting to defend a place of great defense. I hate having to say defense, but you are defending a place, and then you sally forth to attack whatever is attacking you, right? So it's basically like in Helm's Deep, where Aragorn and Theoden ride out of the keep, and before into the orcs, before Gandalf comes and rescues and adds his support with the Rohirrim. All right, and that is a sortie when they ride out from the keep and they're going to have one last stand, right? That is a sortie. They are exiting to attack from a place of defense. Now, what does that say? Is that whatever kind of tack and jibe you might make based off of a given situation, all of that is inherently impacted by your internal compass and personality and your nature of being, right? And that's why he makes this comparison to, the Andes and the Himalayas having zero effect on the circumference of the earth, right? Because when you zoom out and you look at the whole, it doesn't matter that, the Himalayas make however much of a difference on the topography. It's negligible when viewed as the whole, right? So that's what Emerson is pointing out here. Oh God, we're overheating already. So that's why, he's saying that why he's postulating that no man can violate his nature, right? Is that everything that you do is intrinsic to your nature, and that every action that you take actually reinforces that and makes the kind of the gravitational force, essentially, of your nature. It just compounds it with each reinforcing action that you take that aligns with that, right? He also compares it to an acrostic or an Alexandrian stanza, which I didn't really know what those were either, but it's poems and poetry that reads the same. It's like an acronym, right? So an acrostian is an acronym, and an Alexandria stanza is like when it reads the same forwards and backwards, right? So it doesn't matter. Basically, he's just reinforcing this idea that it doesn't matter which way you look at it. It's reinforcing the same essential core, right? And then one of the things that I highlighted that I think is really important that, sorry, I'm checking my heat levels here. The first thing that I highlighted in this section was, we pass for what we are. Men imagine that they communicate their virtue or vice only by overt actions, and do not see that virtue or vice emit a breath at every moment. So I made a couple of notes about that, but we'll let the camera cool off and then pick back up here. But I think that that is an extremely important, if you take nothing else from this, it is that we pass for what we are. All right, now we'll pick back up here and dig into some examples that have been thrust upon us in the public that are great characterizations, I think, to draw this or to reinforce this conclusion. All right, especially in an era of contrasting political and public espousments versus private actions and decisions, and this renewed importance of authenticity over performativeness. All right, so we're going to let this cool, and we will pick back up discussing we pass for what we are. All right. Welcome back, darlings. And just by the way, the blood moon approaches, and so we have, physical representation of such monthly occurrences making itself known with gigantic Vesuvius-like pimples. But it's better than it used to be, I'm telling you. But diet is everything. Now, where were we? Yes, passing for what we are. Now, this is something that I have believed for a long time. I just think that Emerson happens to put it in a really eloquent way. But then again, this is a man who clearly has a much better grasp over the English language than I do right now. But we're working on it, okay? It is progress. So, what is he talking about here? It's that people tell you who they are with their actions. And it's this, what he's talking about and what I think we see illustrated with various public figures now is this contradiction between your professions, and by professions I mean like your declarations, right? Like the things that you say in public versus your actions, right? Like there's a lot of elected representatives who have a distinct history of saying one thing and then their actions standing in contradiction to that, right? Like there are an enormous amount of officials who have built a career on telling their constituents that they believe in XYZ, that they are on a mission to do ABC, and then their voting record and their legislative resume stands in direct opposition to that. And what I think is the beauty of kind of modern social media and why, people like Hillary Clinton get on they get on TV, they get in front of a camera, and they directly tell you that the whole goal is to stop this free exchange of information via the internet because they, quote, will lose control. And I think that that is the truth. The reason that certain groups of people are trying so hard to put a cap on the availability of information is because they want to control. And the best way to do that is to limit, filter, or disseminate information under the aegis of benevolence, right? Whereas, kind of like the First Amendment, there's no such thing as hate speech. There's just speech. There's speech that you agree with, there's speech that you disagree with, but it's just speech. It's just opinions. And information on the internet is just that. It's just information. And if you seek to put a stamp of right or wrong on something, typically it results from it springs from a desire for control and to control the narrative, which is exactly what they want, because if you control the narrative, then you control the power. And that's where this new internet age and ultra connectivity is becoming so detrimental to those who previously have used the tight control and tight dissemination of specific information to their own ends, right? And it's why we see such a stark difference between some of these lifelong public servants who have, spent decades espousing certain ideologies, espousing certain points of view, and then when you actually have access and have readily, accessible documentation of their actions, you have this conflict. And I think it's a beautiful thing, because it requires people to live and be what they are, and they're being forced to pass as what they are rather than to be actors and convince you of what they're not, right? And I think that you see that in not just in the political arena, but just in the kind of specifically now, social media and influencers, which are kind of the new versions of Hollywood starlets and stars, right? You have, you see that within that segment of the population as well, is that you're starting to realize that a lot of people that have the public spotlight were performing, and that their personal actions in their private lives, again, have a direct conflict with the character that they're trying to portray in public. And one of the things that I think separates the modern crop of influencers and I would say, I think there needs to be a different word for it, right? I think that influencer has a specific connotation to it, whereas I think we're finally getting into the point now where we're realizing that there is a crop of independent tastemakers who have built their own communities based around true authenticity and true transparency, right? And I mentioned one of the people previously in our recognition of the week is Cenat and Asmongold. And I think both of these gentlemen stand as, really great examples of people that, for better or for worse, are who they are. And they are that in a genuine way. And you see that in the personal and private interactions and the personal and private choices that they make with their, with their money, with their influence, with the skills and traits that they've been given, and in contrast to those who, have been given an enormous amount of privilege and opportunity and try and act like they don't have it, or live in a way that stands in contrast to what they're espousing, right? Like there's, specifically, like, look at the mayor of New York right now, which again, I can speak on because I am a New Yorker. I've been here for 15 years now. But, you have someone who espouses not communistic, it's straight just communist ideology. And yet, his wife is always decked out in the newest duds. She's now being pushed as this, leading light of style and taste, which personally I greatly disagree with. Anytime major, I say quote unquote major, because I don't think that they're major anymore, but anytime your MSM branches in fashion or, social taste making, try and push someone as a leading light without any sort of organic foundation. It's suspect to me, because it's not like she just got with Mom Donnie. She's been his wife, she's been his partner for quite some time, and he's been in the public eye for at least a year, year and a half, 2 years now. If you look at his initial social and public push for his mayoralship, right? And it's just now that, after he's won, that they're pushing her as this icon. Personally, I think if she was this, paragon of taste and style, then the platform would have already existed and they wouldn't need to push her so hard, because it would have already organically formed itself. But that's a whole nother thing. We're getting distracted. But it is, again, this really significant example of someone who espouses certain ideologies like communism and socialism, and yet their personal choices stand in stark contrast to that, right? Like, if you are someone who is truly attempting to align oneself with communistic ideology, then you wouldn't be wearing hundreds of dollars worth of terrible footwear. You wouldn't be, trying to grace the pages of style and taste magazines that are economically unreachable for a vast majority of the country. You wouldn't be, someone whose resume is filled with internships and, unpaid political work, right? Because you're getting money to live that lifestyle from somewhere. Normal people can't afford to have a resume that is entirely built on seemingly altruistic volunteer and internship work. It's just not possible. And so, again, there's this direct conflict between stated ideals and principles versus the lived, right? Like, communists don't have 3 weddings, all right? They go down to the courthouse and they get hitched, and then they go home to peel potatoes, all right? But anyways, I think that, so in a video that Asmongold actually made that addresses this, but in a streamer context, was his recent criticism of the streamer Cutie Pie, who, talked about being relevant and having, she spoke about her belief that she has a finger on the pulse of the everyman, when her lived life directly shows that that's not true, right? So Asmon posted a video about that, talking about his relatability versus hers, which I agree with. I think his assessment is extremely accurate. And then, you see for public representatives, right? And I'm just naming these examples because I think that they are particularly poignant in the time that we find ourselves, and also they are already people that are well known within the collective zeitgeist right now. And so a good political contrast, I think, is Tim Burchett, a congressional representative from the state of Tennessee, and Ilhan Omar, who is a infamous representative from the state of Minnesota. And if you look at how these two individuals live their life, the social media presence that they both have, the personal projection that they put forward as who they are versus the actions that they have taken, as well as the growth of bank accounts, darling. Like, you can profess all you want, but the money's going to give you tell your lies, baby, okay? The money will show you the lies. And, you can also look at, within the billionaire class, you can look at Elon Musk versus George Soros. I will make a link. I need to make notes. Links, so there is an online personality named Insurrection Barbie who has done some really enlightening journalistic work on George Soros specifically, and I'll link her Substack below in the comments if I can as well. But there's our culture right now and the zeitgeist right now are filled with really beautiful examples of people who are passing for what they are versus those who are pretending. And I think that it's a rather landmark part of our collective experience right now is coming to terms with the reality of this. Anyway, so continuing on, Emerson says that there will be an agreement in whatever variety of actions so that they be each honest and natural in their hour. And what he's saying is pretty straightforward, right? It's that whatever happens, your actions should be, if done in service of who, with alignment with who you are and your principles and your personal nature, right? That when looked back at with objectivity, they will speak for themselves and they will be correct based off of the situation at the time, right? And I think that holds true. I think that you can look back throughout history and you can see that even actions that were potentially seemed, or to us now, seem to be, tainted with and stand in opposition to, where we are currently. You can look at the context of every situation and you can typically see that, yes, these actions were warranted, or yes, I understand how this person was led to behave or to act in this way, right? And Emerson goes on to enunciate this by saying, your genuine action will explain itself and will explain your other genuine actions. Again, kind of reinforcing the idea that your nature and your alignment with that is, like everything, All right, well, apparently, my little photo setting changed, but you know what, that's okay. We're a little bit further away now versus close in, but it do be what it do be. We don't know how to take it back. But anyway, where were we? Emerson, I hope in these days we have heard the last of conformity and consistency. So, and then he says, let us never bow and apologize more. Right? So what I wrote, one of the notes that I wrote, sprouting off from never let us bow and apologize more, I said, there are two different responses that you can have to a situation, right? And that is, you are correct or you are wrong, okay? And when you say to a situation or to someone else, you are correct, the points or the arguments that they have changed your perspective. That's what you are correct means. And when you say you are wrong, it means that the points or arguments that they've presented did not persuade you. And when you say you are wrong, you should always have reasoning behind, right? But that's what you can say instead of, apologizing or bowing, is you can say you are correct or you are wrong. Then he goes on to say, let us affront and reprimand the smooth mediocrity and squalid contentment of the times, and hurl in the face of custom and trade and office the fact which is the upshot of all history, that there is a great responsible thinker and actor working wherever a man works, that a true man belongs to no other time or place, but is the center of things. Character, reality, reminds you of nothing else. The man must be so much that he must make all circumstances indifferent. And he goes on to list a couple of different examples, from Caesar to Christ to Martin Luther and the Reformation, Fox and Quakerism, or no, Luther was, Quakerism and Fox, Scipio and the height of Rome. And he states that all history resolves itself very easily into the biography of a few stout and earnest persons. Just kind of solidifying his example that it is the character and the continued diligence of a few men to live in virtuous and honorable ways that align with their nature that shape the course of history. And then he says, and I thought this was very important, let a man then know his worth and keep things under his feet. Let him not peep or steal or skulk up and down with the air of a charity boy, a bastard or an interloper in the world that exists for him. But the man in the street, finding no worth in himself which corresponds to the force which built a tower or sculpted a marble god, feels poor when he looks on these. So it's basically just saying that if you find nothing worthwhile in yourself, then when you look on the greatness of others, all you see is your own inequity, right? Whereas if you're firm in what you are capable of offering to the world, and what you have within yourself, then you're not influenced or intimidated by what others are able to offer. And then he also talks about, art and sculpture, and that a picture waits for my verdict. It is not to command me, but I am to settle its claim to praise. So it's basically saying that, like, art and, situations that present themselves to you should not tell you what to think. They should wait for you to settle its claim to praise, right? So a good example of this is, and I feel pretty strongly about this when it comes to modern art versus classical art, is that I think the huge difference that I have always seen, and that I think is a defining characteristic of modern art versus traditional art, is that modern art oftentimes, actually, I don't really know any modern art that doesn't require this. Whether that's, Pollock to, the person that taped the banana to the wall, right, at Art Basel a few years ago. Modern art requires basically a thesis to be stapled up next to it to explain to you why it is art and why it has validity. Versus if you go into the Met and you go into essentially really any portion of the Met, it's typically just, art is just accompanied by, the name of the artist, the date that it was painted, and perhaps just a short blurb about, the author, so that you have context of when they lived their life and the, global situation that surrounded that particular person in their time, right? But it doesn't seek to tell you how to feel about the art or why it is art, right? It just is. It's able to be there and hang on that wall and speak for itself. It doesn't require a dissertation to force you to accept that it is art. Whereas most modern art is like that. It requires, like I said, it requires a dissertation, essentially, to explain to you why it's art, rather than to allow you to understand that it is art, right? And to accept it on its own merits. And, personally, I think that's because a lot of modern art has no merit and is just done by people who have become really good at bullshitting and explaining why it's art in a way that feels persuasive enough for you to buy it, or to feel like you have to buy it, otherwise you are lacking in some regard. And maybe I will do a little, Met versus MoMA video where I go and get concrete evidence of this. But being an artist, going to art school, and living in New York for as long as I have, I can tell you without, reservation that this is the way that it works. Like, if you go to the Met versus you go to the MoMA, like, the MoMA, every single piece of artwork has, like, they might as well have, like, an essay or, like, a small novel, slapped up next to a piece of art, or art. I use the term art loosely because personally I don't think it's art. Like, if you have to try and force it upon me as art, it was never art to begin with, because true art speaks for itself, right? Like, no one needs to put a dissertation in the Sistine Chapel to explain to you why it's art, right? You don't need a dissertation next to, the statue of David to explain to you why it's art. And that is what I think that he's referring to here. And funny enough, I'll put a link to this as well. CIA MoMA video. There is a video that I was watching the other day, which I really enjoyed, because it just, again, we all like things that confirm whatever personal biases we might have, but it was very reassuring to me to stumble across a video where a gentleman was explaining what I often felt, which is, but didn't quite know how to put a finger on, this very this very idea that I was just talking about of needing art forced upon you and using language and, you know, this subtle haranguing that you know, if you don't accept this as art or valid, then it somehow is a reflection on you and, you know, your faculties if you don't accept it as art. But a gentleman did a video about the CIA and their connections to the modern art movement in post-World War II. So I'll link that as well because it was very enlightening. But yes. Now, we're very close to being done because this has been a little bit of a slog, and we're going to, it's just going to be, you know, it's going to be a little Emerson couple of weeks around here because we're going to work through it section by section. But to wrap up this week, we're going to say, we have a couple little quotes left. So, the state of man who is in the world a sort of sot. So what is a sot? A sot is a habitual drunkard or alcoholic. And why does he use a sot as his symbolic, you know, individual here? It's because typically being a sot, a habitual drunkard or alcoholic, demonstrates a lack of personal fortitude, right? So that's what he's kind of talking about here, is a man or a person who lacks that personal fortitude. But now, and then wakes up, exercises his reason, and finds himself a true prince, right? So he's basically saying that anyone, even someone who is a sot, can have moments where they wake up, they exercise their reason, and find themselves a prince, right? And it's basically, you know, saying that you are who the world treats you as, which is also made by who you treat yourself as, right? Like they're a weird kind of, you know, chicken and the egg thing, which personally is why I talk a lot about, and I'm going to continue to talk a lot about, the importance of how you choose to present yourself aesthetically, right? And the importance of dressing and choosing attire and a visual language for yourself that sets you up for personal success, even if no one else sees you, right? Like, what are you choosing to put on that, even if it's just you on your own, how does it make you feel? How does it reinforce the image that you have of yourself, or the image that you want to have for yourself, right? Like another one of the statements that people use a lot is dress for the job you want, not for what you have. And I think that that's true even on a personal level, right? Like if you're constantly wearing, you know, polyester sweatpants or polyester, you know, pajama pants with Crocs or slides and, you know, a sweatshirt, and you're walking around with a bonnet on, like that's going to have a deleterious effect on how you view yourself, right? Not even considering the effect it has on how others view you, right? So, and then he goes on, and I'm going to probably, you know what, we'll read this whole passage, just because I only highlighted a segment of it, but there, at the beginning, there were two words that I, you know, had to look up and research for myself just to kind of ground myself in what they meant and to find out what they meant. So he says, our reading is mendicant and sycophantic. So mendicant, M-E-N-D-I-C-A-N-T, is a beggar, typically religious proficants. So a beggar, typically a religious proficant, who badgers others for sustenance. So this typically historically was used to describe like Dominican friars and their tendency to cast off the burden of physical wealth and ownership, but then simultaneously badger the people that they inhabit a community with for sustenance, right? On the basis of religious preference, right? That like, because I'm a priest, because I'm so holy, and because I have, you know, decided to swear off worldly goods, you then have to support me financially, fiduciarily, and, you know, with, you know, food and lodging and like that kind of thing. So that's what mendicant was referring to. In modern day parlance, that would be a welfare queen. And sycophantic is something that is being done in an obsequious way in order to gain advantage. So now knowing that, our reading is mendicant and sycophantic. In history, our imagination plays us false. Kingdom and lordship, power and estate are a gaudier vocabulary than Private John and Edward in a small house in common day's work. But the things of life are the same to both. The sum total of both is the same. Why all this deference to Alfred and Skanderberg and Gustavus? So Alfred was like Alfred the Great. I didn't look up Skanderberg and Gustavus. I should look that up. But suppose they were virtuous. Did they wear out virtue? And then this is what I highlighted. As great a stake depends on your private act today as followed their public and renowned steps. When private men shall act with original views, the luster will be transferred from the actions of those kings to those gentlemen. So again, he's just reinforcing the idea that as much hinges on what you choose to do in your private day-to-day as those who are in illustrious, powerful positions, right? So get out and vote in your primaries for someone new. No matter who, vote new. So that is the conclusion of this week's Emerson dissection. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it was useful, because again, the whole point of these videos is twofold, right? I want to continue passing along the information and the things that have been handed down to me from the people important in my life, my ancestors, and the knowledge that I come across and has been given to me, and that in an attempt to reestablish what it means to be an American and what it means to be a part of our nation and our culture. So, and Emerson is a great example of that. So here we are, Emerson Part 2, the redo, the remix. And we'll pick back up next week with Emerson Part 3, which is all about magnetism, and original action is explained when we inquire the reason of self-trust. So pick back up next week for, you know, that mouthful. But hopefully this was helpful. If it's not, well, hey, I guess you can not watch. But anyways, trying to be useful, and have a good week, you guys. Bye.